Thanks, Evan. Um, we might as well get going. We just updated the agenda on website, and I can drop that link, or Evan can drop that link in the chat, or Evan already did. Um, and I wonder, Billy and Jael, if you want me to walk through the agenda, or you want to say a few words before we get going. How would you like to kick it off?
Do we have a quorum?
Ah, great question.
One, two, three, four, five, six. Evan says yes. I think that is a quorum for us.
You have 7 with Abby. So
Oh, I didn't even see happy. Great. Awesome. All right. So yeah, that's fine with me, David, if you're willing to do it.
Sure. So I'm just going to share my screen with the agenda. Some of you might have it open on your own as well. Um, and what Jael and Billy and I have been talking about the last few weeks is how does this subcommittee gather and really work through the pieces it hasn't done yet. And so you can send up the whole thing up to the council. And so to do that, uh, you all need to do a deepish dive into your Excel sheets in the full set of recommendations, pathway strategies, and actions that you've been working on all these months. We focused a lot on those priority actions the last time, and those were presented to the council. If there are things that need to be, really big picture issues that need to be addressed in those priority actions, let's do that today too. And there's a heavy focus in today's conversation on the deep dive into those Excels. So that's what we're going to be doing. And the way to do it, first, we'll do a walk through some combination of task group leads and Evan and Billy and Jael can just walk us through to show us what we have. This isn't walking through every line in the Excels, but just sort of orienting people how these different documents look, because the different task groups actually have a little bit different formatting. And so just make sure everybody knows what they're looking at. So to do that, we wanted to just give people 10 minutes, and 10 minutes isn't enough time to read. It's like you haven't read it, 10 minutes isn't going to be enough. However, it's still important for an orientation. Maybe you want to go back to an area you didn't get as much, or maybe you want to do a quick skim over here. Let's just take some time and let you sit with those documents a little bit after we walk through them. And then the next thing we thought would be helpful to do is before we sort of try to work our way through, let's just make sure we understand what we need to work on. Because it could be that 95% of what's in these sheets is great. It's fine, good to go to the council, no worries. What we're trying to identify is where do people have some heartburn? Where is it we need to have a conversation as a subcommittee? And so let's make that punch list of, issues. Not try to solve them right then, just like I want to talk about this, 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 this. Great. And let's have a relatively high bar in terms of what we think needs to be addressed. If it's wordsmithing or things like that, let's not do this here because we'll probably drown in that. And then we just have big chunks of time to discuss. We got a full chunk here. We'll spend a little bit of time on each issue. We'll see if there's something that everybody agrees to. If not, let's capture that range of views efficiently and then move on to the next thing. So that's what we thought. We'll do some public comment in the middle of that, and then come back and have more time to discuss and finish up by 2. We need to leave a little time at the end to talk about what happens next and, what is a subcommittee, are your roles in the coming months. So that's what we talked about with Billy, Jael, and Evan. I just want to check before we dive into it, how does that sound as our agenda today? Any friendly amendments about how we want to use our time together? Looks good? Okay. Great. All right. Super. Okay, so the first step in this is to do this review. And so I don't know, maybe Evan or maybe Billy, I'm not sure who wants, I'm happy to share my screen with this stuff. And, for instance, like Ryan, maybe you walk us through the tab let me just open it up right now. I'm talking. the tab that's the task group that you've really been working on. You can walk us through sort of how we should be reading that tab. Here we go. I downloaded a version in Excel. But this is the one that's linked to the agenda. Are you seeing that?
Mhm.
Okay. So I thought maybe Ryan, if you're able to do this tab, and I'm not sure if Jake is here. I'm not seeing him. Can help us with the second tab, which is the second task group. And then Earl, Judy, and Andrew can help us understand what's going on in the third tab. And we don't need to go through every action, strategy, etc. We just need to understand how to read this and understand what's going on. I think is Evan. And Evan, you can be helpful too if you did some formatting changes when you pulled these together.
I tried to make them all look relatively similar,
Super.
so that you could read them across all three. So the yellow is kind of the priority action that came out of each task group, but otherwise they should all look pretty similar.
Great. And so usually it's like this column B is the way it was received, right, from the last action plan. And then if there's changes, there's a revised language over here, and et cetera. There's some notes in this one here too. Okay. Great. Andrew?
Thanks, David. Could you articulate what the expectation is from the council on this broader? I mean, I have a good sense of what's expected for the priorities, but could you talk about the expectations from the council on what we're doing with this larger set of actions? And for example, if it says being implemented, I assume they don't really need to know that's a priority. I mean, just understanding what they're expecting so that we're going in the right direction.
Thanks, Andrew. That's a great question. I'll invite Jael and others to, to weigh in on this. My understanding from how we've been working with the council so far and what they're expecting is that they would love you as a subcommittee at least to have had eyes on all of these previous ones. And if there was things that really needed to be updated or changed, that you flagged those and made those changes. And it's still something that the council is going to have to wrestle with too. They'll look through them all as well. But I think the idea here is, did we catch anything that really needed a revision in this update to the plan? And as Billy, you've said oftentimes, it's like the premise is it continues on, right? That's the premise. And then if there's a change that needs to happen, you all as a subcommittee can provide that expertise that you bring to this and say, no, this is not appropriate at this point, or we really need to do this other thing. So that's what we're trying to flag, for instance, today. You all have done the big heavy lift already, right? The big heavy lift was raising up these priority things and getting them in front of the council. That was hard work, and you did a really nice job with it. Now you just need to say, have I checked everything in here to make sure we're not sending something up to the council that's really inappropriate? That's my take on it. Jael,
Yeah.
why don't you jump in and then I'll jump over to Judy here.
Well, also, like, if there is any major gaps, we've talked about that before, or things that are missing, or yeah, things that might be outdated that don't belong in here anymore, or things that just stand out as not really being appropriate or necessary. Just, I think they just want more a general feel of how these all come across and if they're really going to meet the demand and the challenge that we have.
Thanks, Jael. Judy?
Just to tag on to what Andrew said, when we first presented our comments on this, there were quite a few that were like in progress, or I forget what the term was you used.
Mhm.
And we didn't comment on those because we wanted to know where they stood. And we haven't heard that yet.
Right.
And in light of what June said when she resigned, she said that the Climate Council was on the wrong track. And so it's particularly important for us to know what direction those are going in, if it's the right track or the wrong track.
Yeah. And I think at this point of the process, my guess is what you as a subcommittee will want to do is say, dear council, we went through this. For these that are saying being implemented, we had some questions about what is the status of it. We didn't fully get those answers. And so we're sending these to you without those answers. And so I think
So,
that's,
so are you saying there's an expectation we will not have those answers?
I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, today, you know, if there's things that folks in state government who are here in the subcommittee can help provide answers that feel mission critical to understand, maybe the folks right here in the subcommittee can help with that. But maybe Evan can help too with this because there are sheets that have more detailed explanations next to the being implemented with notes. And so that those have been available as part of this process. And I'm not sure whether state government is going to be able to do more than that right now.
Well, it seems kind of odd to me to turn in 2 high priorities out of 85 plus, and not know the answers to the rest of them.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I wonder, Evan, maybe you can just help in terms of the resources that have been available in these months. There has been a detailed sheet that had some more notes to it. Is that correct? About the status.
Yeah, and it was in the worksheet, in each of the task groups templates that they work through. There is a sheet that says Ag and Eco All, which I had noted before that has status notes. I'm happy to share my screen to show you what that looks like. Can everyone see that okay?
Almost. There we go.
So,
Yeah.
It's too little, but that's all right.
sorry. Well, this is the sheet that you submitted at the end of December. But in Ag and Eco All, it has a list of all the actions. And if you were to slide over, it gives you the action status and then the status notes. So hopefully would be helpful for you to review for
Okay,
each of those.
and so that'll be on the document that we are going to.
That's
And
correct.
can you scroll down to 3? So theme 3, so that we can see if
Yeah, I mean,
that-
you'd have to parse through. I mean, this Excel is a little bit wonky, but all the actions should have, if you were to expand these cells, you can see that they
so if it's
have.
go back, just pick one. Like, so it says advancing right there and there's nothing beside it. Advance.
Um,
So just pick one that says advancing, because that's what I was talking about.
yeah, uplifting. So, yeah, I mean, if there isn't a specific status for one of these things, you can send me a discrete ask, and I can do some research into it quickly for you. But otherwise, to my knowledge, this column is kind of all I have.
Okay, because that's what we had a lot of them that said they were advancing, and and um and we didn't know how or what or which way it was advancing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there were specific questions, I'm happy to do a little research and find out. But otherwise, we're kind of at the later stages here.
That's what I've been talking about. We're at the later stages and we've given 2 priorities with no answer for the rest.
Well, I think this is a good opportunity to look in at the documents and see what's in there, right? Because you all have done a lot of work. And so it would be helpful to look into the documents, see the work that's gotten done. And if there's pending questions about it, let's note those. And maybe the dimensions of that actually aren't that big. Let's see. But I think let's go ahead and dive in and see what we have done, and then take stock if there's something we need to say about the fact that we're not comfortable with the amount of information we've had to really make informed judgments on a handful of things. Ryan?
Just share my view on this, which is this is the amount of resources we have been given to do this work, which is why we're focused on priorities that we know touch the goals that we want to elevate. And so there's a lot of work in each one of these sections, which we don't have the human power to process at this time. And I think acknowledging the resource limitation in our analysis is important, and we need to emphasize those that we're putting forward because they've been vetted, we've got good data behind it, and hopefully we'll have some consensus around a lot of these to show that this group of Ag and Eco thinks these are the top priorities for the state to implement to advance positive climate action. So it is what it is from my vantage point. There's a lot we won't be able to analyze, and the way it goes, unfortunately, sometimes.
Thanks, Ryan. Earl, let's grab your hand, and then I'll pull the screen back up with the Excels, and we can just orient ourselves to what's in there. Earl, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank Ryan for his comments, but also to because, in the situation, I guess that's where we are. But back to Judy's original comment, there were some of those that are advancing, whatever that means. And those were very interesting, some more interesting than what we picked as priorities, but we couldn't really analyze them because we didn't know what advancing means and where they actually are. So maybe they could have been prioritized, but we don't know. And I think that's part of Judy's comments there. Aside from that, I'd like to get into the spreadsheet. I only have two comments about the spreadsheet because I really appreciate how it was written, and I have no problems with it. I just have two things I'd like for us to consider. One is, again, working lands. I think it's in one of the priority one priorities where they again mention working lands and agriculture and working lands are working for us. I think that term needs to be dropped. Just drop the term working, because as Judy has always said, it's all working. And what I see as the definition of working is what's being forested, but we're really working to get Vermont to recognize, set aside as also working for us. What's the difference? And so I would like to reconsider that term working and consider dropping it. The second thing is PES, Payment for Ecological Services. I would like to see a better term used than that, because the connotation of PES is carbon trading, because the carbon traders are using this term. And that is confusing to everyone that I work with around the state. And I've done enough research now to be able to trust that y'all in the agencies are not looking at this for the purposes of carbon trading. I've been talking to NRCS about this as well, identifying where the carbon trading actually is in the USDA programs. And so, I can see that pathway forward to doing this right. And I think that's where y'all are heading. I trust that now, but why can't we just drop that term, and just call it ecological services or services to, you know, I guess just ecological services. I just don't like the payments part and the PES. To continue using PES is just linking with this other, and I'd like to see Vermont really stand up and say, no, we're not doing that. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Earl. I appreciate you doing that. So I was noting those 2 issues on my punch list as you were naming them. So thanks for doing that. Let's pull up. I'm going to go ahead and pull up this sheet again. This is again the first task group. You saw what the priority issues were when we in the PowerPoint that was presented up to the council last month. And those are signaled, as Evan says, in yellow. The rest are, some new ones here. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Ryan, is there anything you want to signal on this sheet?
No, each one of these actions are written into the initial action plan in one way or another. They will, from what I've heard, will continue to be present in some form. What we're doing is taking those actions that will most support the goal of increasing sequestration of carbon soils and reducing emissions. I will note that the emission reduction side is only something for agriculture, but we've been arguing for different accounting for the land use sector, and so in our recommendations are more reflective of those types of actions and programs that expand beyond just strictly production agriculture. I've tried to share some updates as to the amount of implementation that's happened, the cost effectiveness, the results that you can apply. I'd be happy to walk through that, but suffice it to say, the programs that are being implemented in green there, as an example, are rolled up into one priority action rather than calling out each one of these pathways, right? We focus on, we need pasture, we need rotational grazing, we need Last time, we're taking all of that and condensing into, these programs support that type of natural climate solution. Words are failing me at the moment, but so those are the specific examples of practices that have an impact, and the program is called out with them as well. And in the write-up, hope that we'll be able to share all the data that is behind these lines of words in this spreadsheet.
That's really great. And quick before I go to JL, I just noticed that there's been some discussion around these are the more forest specific ones. And is there a reason it doesn't say keep as is? Are you just waiting for some more input from someone before you put that in there?
Yeah, that's an FPR question. We got input on a number of the forestry priorities. These were some specific ones in my mind that either need to be just kept as is because we have no reason to not move it forward, and or it's a question for FPR or ANR more broadly about where they'd like to see that status marker. Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. JL?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, process here, are we going to go over this task group 1 section and then discuss it, or we're going to read through all of them and then discuss them all?
I had imagined doing the latter, but we've kind of done the former. So I'm open to it. If someone has you're looking at this and you're like, oh, I definitely want to put something on the punch list, just like what Earl did. We could do that too. So if you have something you want to throw on the punch list, I'd say go right ahead.
Okay. I'm trying to see, I have a paper version that I've been working off of, and I'm trying to match it
Does it
up
have
with
these
the,
numbers on the side?
yeah, it does not.
Oh,
So,
bummer.
let me just. Okay, so it's really about, it's 26, row 26. It's about programs to track agricultural inputs, and
Yep.
that these, they already exist, but they have not been assessed through the lens of the contribution of climate change in terms of like, what are the pesticides and fertilizers that farmers are using, how is that impacting climate change? And there hasn't been a lot of enforcement or assessment. And can we suggest that some sort of assessment happen? The other piece is that it's not just about climate change, it's about human health and, PFAS contamination. There's some reports that are showing that a lot of this chemical use is contributing to PFAS accumulation in the soil. So I just wanted to highlight that aspect. And then I'm not really sure where it should live in this section or support adaptation. But in terms of kind of, it's more about the workload. So a lot of these programs are funded through NRCS, through the USDA, to get farmers to change their management practices to incorporate more climate smart, which is a term I don't actually like because there's a lot of greenwashing there. But there's not the, and I brought this up before, the staff to really write those contracts for farmers. There's a lot in here about educating farmers, but not about like the workload it takes to get those contracts completed so that farmers can then get the money to actually make these changes. So I don't know where that would live, and if that's too much detail.
I'm just noting it. Let's put it on our punch list and see if there's something to do when we go through here.
Okay.
Issue of workload on farmers to access funds and things like that. Absolutely. Let's put it on the list. Okay.
Great.
Again, I don't want to go into the content of this right now. I don't want to like debate these issues. I just want to like name issues and make sure we all know what's on the page is the goal here. Judy, go ahead.
Can you define farmer?
Is that to me, Judy?
Anybody. I mean, is a farmer like somebody who has rows and rows and rows of garden? Or is a farmer like we have in 5 different places in the state, little hidden fields where we grow heirloom seeds so they don't cross-pollinate? What is a farmer?
I think all those are people who are growing food or seed or, for their communities. Or if they're, homesteader. Go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry, I didn't know if I was waiting for you to continue. I didn't mean to jump in there. I just wanted to share, right? The executive branch were guided by statute. And so depending on what program you're talking about, for what purpose, there are many different definitions of farmer. For water quality regulations, right? $2,000 of sales, that'll get you in. If you want to be a current use farmer, the standard is much higher, with 50% of your income having to be derived from farming. And so it depends on the program, what they're trying to count, and for the purposes of, to be brief, it's growing food or crops.
So it's based on making money?
No, it's not based on making money. That's one of the 4 ways that someone can be designated a farm for the purposes of water quality regulation. That is often the simplest bar that people have, because 4 acres often is a threshold some small farmers can't meet. However, they're making quite a bit of gross production off of 1 or 2 acres of mixed vegetable.
Can
So
I
if,
put a pause on this? Because I really don't want to get into the weeds on all these things right now because we need to look at the other sheets. We need to sort of overall develop a punch list and then make sure we're hitting the highest priority things. So I'm nervous like doing deep dives like this right now.
well, and I as well am nervous about using the word farmers and all of these things without having a constant definition of what farmers mean.
So that sounds like it's on your punch list. Let's define farmers and make sure we know what's going on there. Okay. Yeah. Jake?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to second Giles' comment about the simplicity or efficiency and accessibility of applying for resources and funds for farmers. That is something that we heard quite a lot about in recent like stakeholder engagements, and I know that others have been hearing about this very frequently. It's come up a lot with flood relief as one specific issue. And so I don't want to lose that specifically because as we often talk about like adding technical service layers or resources, we don't then talk about the difficulties or sort of inefficiencies that can create if they're not very accessible or easy to access. So yeah, I think that's an important parallel item to keep in mind as we're recommending anything that involves technical services.
Sounds important. So let's circle back and see how we put that in there. I'm tempted to push on to the other tabs just to make sure folks are aware. What I'd love to do is look through these tabs, give you all a minute, like 5-10 minutes to collect your thoughts about really what are the priority conversations we want to have. I've noted a few just out of this, but I'd love to give you a time just to sit with the documents for a little bit. In this one, is there anything different about this document that we need to be aware of? Either Jake or Evan or whoever's had your hands on this most recently from Task Group 2.
I don't think there's any I think that the challenge here is just as Ryan was describing for one of his of like how they're collapsing multiples into one. There are some instances here of there's some priorities in different sections that we're trying to suggest should be brought together. And the way to indicate that in the spreadsheet is a little clunky right now. So I think that's just more like how we format things.
Yeah.
In the end. Yeah, but I think there was our prioritization document that went out. This reflects all of that. And it's just a matter of kind of indicating where things are actually might be coming together, being combined. That might be a little hard to just figure out right now, but we have notes to indicate those changes.
Great. Thanks, Jake. Okay. Yeah. If there's
sorry, Dave, one other comment. I think all three of us share like a TA, or we might have an overlapping the same like technical assistance, either action or strategy. So it again just brings up like how do we as a full committee bring all of our changes to those, maybe what are the same actions or strategies, bring all those pieces together into one.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, I believe we did that when you lifted up the priority actions. We did a single technical assistance education one that pulled from all three task groups.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's that. It's the last priority action on that slide deck.
Okay.
Like a combined thing across all three task groups.
Great.
Okay. And then the third tab from task group 3 looks like this. And I wonder, task group 3 folks, is there anything you want to say just so that people know how to read this? Any other guidance in terms of how people look at this?
I mean, I can jump in.
Hmm?
Um, we did a fair amount of annotation. So we have a revised column, and in that we show what was added in bold and what was struck out and struck straight through, all that kind of thing. And then we also have a comments column. So the annotation's pretty good in terms of what we did, but it gets complicated in that we combined a lot of things into our priority actions, and an overarching question or action that's needed is what got left behind in that process, and what happens with those things that got left behind. What is the expectation of the council, and or do we just say those aren't in the set of priorities we have? One example of something that we didn't spend a lot of time on was, for example, town level planning for things like compact settlement. There was a fair number of actions sort of in that general realm that we referenced the importance of having compact settlement not be in conflict with areas that should be conserved or that are in floodplains, but we really didn't dig into the sort of regional and local level planning. And so what happens to those? I'm not sure. I think there are some actions here that that should still be forwarded to the council that weren't included in our combined actions.
Got it.
But we'd have to do a little work to make sure we agreed on that. So, but I would ask Judy and Earl for their thoughts as well.
Thanks, Andrew. And I will say that it all gets forwarded to the council, right? It isn't like only the highlighted stuff. The whole Excel gets forwarded. And so our job today is mostly to make sure that, do we have a general comfort level with the Excel, all three of these tabs? And then what are the caveats we want to write at the top? And I took some notes from your earlier conversation about, yikes, really don't have the human capacity to do the deepest dive on all these things. Yikes, we're not totally sure about the status of advancing. And that's got in the way of us, being clear on some of these things. So the whole thing goes, is what I'm saying. The whole thing goes up to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Task Group 3 folks, anything else you want to say about sort of how this sheet looks? Okay.
I guess I just want to say, so they, I kind of assume that they have the same manpower issue that we have. So if we have a question, because I'm seeing now all the ones that are saying advancing, and we're asking questions, well, with how is it advancing? Is this in the advancement, and so on and so forth? Do they have the manpower to address that?
It's a great question. And it's a question we should pose to the council and the Climate Action Office.
Yeah, because
I guess I would just say a couple things. So this is the inherent challenge in having a plan with over 200 actions. And I think that's why there was a real interest in trying to kind of prioritize and be more tactical in the development of the initial plan and have fewer things that folks could focus the state's resources on. That didn't happen. So we're starting at this place. I think there's certainly time between now and the development of the next plan to drill into this stuff further. And I do think that many of these things are addressed in the detailed notes that Evan alluded to. And, there's been kind of standing offers to elevate or pull out specific actions and connect task groups with the implementers for them to have direct conversations. So I think there's been opportunities to fill in some of these blanks over the last few months, and I appreciate there's a lot going on, so it's been hard to seize on those. But I think there is an inherent capacity issue, but there's also been opportunities, I think, to get some of this information, and in fact, some of it does exist.
JL?
Yeah, I just wanted to check to see if Judy knows that you can get all these documents off the website, and do you know how to do that and where to find it?
Well, yeah, I know you can get it off, but I also have a full-time job. So I'm just thinking if somebody can say it's advancing, here's how it advanced in this bill or whatever, I could just go to that bill.
Yeah. I think this, we don't have it in this document, but the one that Evan showed, we have, the state agency folks put a lot of effort to make that column of status. And so it's in there. Whether every single one has one, I don't know. And what's good for me is like, as I scroll down through here, the ones that said advancing, there's revised language, there's stuff you've done work, you've done a ton of work in here. And so,
Because we had questions about how is it advancing?
right. So this looks like one, for instance, row 35, it's like, you're like, I'm not ready to do something. I need a little more detail. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, maybe there is a paragraph in that other spreadsheet and that'll clear it up. Or maybe it's just, you send it up to the council and say, folks, this one we didn't get to because we didn't have the information we needed. But there's a lot here that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a whole lot. Okay. Earl, and then I want to take a moment for folks to just sit with these documents. Go ahead, Earl.
Yeah. Again, I want to thank Andrew for going over this for us today, and also concerned about advancing along with Judy and trying to sort that out. And the main thing that I want to say right here is the document that is set aside to be sent to the Climate Council. I appreciate how you summarized our priorities, and I want to thank you for that. Again, I just want to look at these two terms, working lands and PES. For PES, I would say services to ecosystems, and change PES to that.
Okay.
Take the money out of it, and say it like it really is. The ecosystems serve us, and all we're talking about is our service to the ecosystem, as another species within that, and how we serve the ecosystem. Payments for ecological services is just wrong about the reality of how it is.
Okay. Yeah, so that's top of my list on the things we need to spend a little time on today. And before we go directly in that and have a conversation amongst all of you how to resolve that concern, I'd be interested. I'd love to give folks just a moment to sit with the docs. It doesn't need to be a full 10 minutes, but if maybe, Evan, you can throw a link in the chat to the document right now. And if you just want to sit with them and think for 5 minutes, or maybe you've already read them in full completely, and think about what it is you want to elevate into our discussion today. I'll tell you what I've already written down. Right now, I've already written down the language around working lands and the language around payment for ecological services. So that's I've written down. I've written down some sort of assessment around pesticides that's climate, but also human health issues, PFAS issues. I've written down workload to farmers and accessibility of programs and funding, et cetera. And then I wrote down definitions of farmer and how we want to signal what we mean in this document when we use a word like that. So those are the 5 things I've written down so far. And I'm happy to pull out other things that you find to be mission critical to be able to send this thing up. The other thing I've written down, as I mentioned, is there's a caveat that needs to get transmitted to the council as well about the human capacity of this group to go through so many actions. And also the questions that folks had about the status of some of these, and feeling somewhat unanswered with those questions. So those are caveats that you could list at the top of whatever you transmit to the council. So I'd love to give folks just 5 minutes to sit with these docs. Evan, can you throw the link in the chat to the Excel? Thank you. You read my mind. And let's just take 5 minutes in silence, gather thoughts. If there's anything besides those 5 topics that you think are mission critical to talk about today, let's pull that out after you've had this 5 minutes to just think. All right, so I'll just be here in silence while we're reading. And if you can't access the document for any reason, let me know.
That's not the same document you showed us, right?
I hope it is.
Um,
Yep, it's the same one.
okay.
It's the same one. take just another minute or so. Okay, so clearly that's not enough time to do a full read of 100 and something actions. However, my hope was in doing that skim and just sort of having a moment to think, we can identify anything else that needs to get worked on. I'm just giving you a window into my notes right now. These are the 5 things I just mentioned, right? The 2 language issues, the pesticide issues, the workload on farmers issues and accessibility, and then the definition of farmer issue. I'd love, before we dive into any of them, I'd just like to get a picture of what we're working on. Andrew, do you have something else you want to put in this list?
Are you looking for thoughts based on just spending a few minutes looking at things and additional things that are?
Yeah, if there's something, yeah, particularly in the spreadsheets that you have spent less time in, like task group 1 and 2, is there something screaming out at you that you're like, Eesh, we need to talk about this before it goes to the council? That's what I'm most looking for.
Okay. I have a couple things, and I'll just throw them out there. And if it's through ignorance that I missed something, then
Okay.
There's a number of places where we lump foresters and farmers, and I guess, like, thinking back, it doesn't seem like we've spent a lot of time talking about forestry and climate adaptation forestry. And are we missing something there that's an important priority? Do we have the expertise on this committee to address that issue? So that's one thing that I wanted to flag. Another is we kind of set aside, and I don't think we as a subcommittee have spent a lot of time talking about development, regional and local planning, and the consistency of that with our priorities and what our role is. And I don't think we have a lot of expertise there. I might be wrong again. And then the third general category of things that I don't think we've spent a lot of time on, again, I may have missed it, is sort of the research and monitoring side of things that, when have we done or do we need additional research on specific topics related to our task here, the set of things we're talking about here, and are there places where we really need to do more thorough monitoring to learn as we go? Again, I may have missed some of those things, but those were some things that jumped out at me when I looked through.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. It makes me so nervous throwing new stuff on the table. There's some ways to deal with that. We're very late in the game to do that, but I thank you for doing those, and let's think about it. Yeah. Other things that we really need to have a conversation with before this stuff goes up to the council, ideally today. Judy?
Again, I lumping foresters and farmers together. I was looking a lot at 1, and it just seemed like there were cases where complete ecosystems could have been mentioned rather than specifically foresters, specifically farmers. Um, and like adding water corridors in some places, and instead of woody vegetation, adding things that make a complete ecosystem, like fiddleheads and wild onions or leeks. And it just seemed to me that we needed to be a little broader and not just focusing on farmers and foresters, and look at complete ecosystems within whatever the thing is they're addressing.
Thanks, Judy. Anything else folks want to jump into today? Stephen?
Hi, David. I think I'm kind of feeling like Andrew that I probably just missed this in actions that are already ongoing and have progress. But I'm just in that quick peruse through, I was recognizing that there was no specific language around um, programs to uh, foster more access to land for new young farmers, people historically disenfranchised from access to land. Just it's just such a key critical piece going forward with an aging farmer population in the state. I think it's 63 years old at this point. And the same is true in the forestry sector, that it's a really aging workforce. So we just again to flag that we really need to be thinking about how we, number one, of course, make a livable income out of working in these sectors, but two, how do we just like really encourage recruitment and development of a workforce in the forestry and ag sectors going forward?
Great. Anything else?
I don't know, David, if I just missed it, but was it someplace in there about the biomass?
So biomass is in table 3, and it's in the way it was presented up to the council on last month, which tried to capture your last conversation about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
David, I just have a couple of observations where there's been some strategies and actions recommended for revision that maybe that speak to like specific programs and then introduce new concepts that may not be appropriate for those specific existing programs. So just want to touch on, 3 or 4 of those as we go through, if that's okay.
Okay, so there's some specific examples.
Where like there's an existing action that's speaking to like a program that's kind of underway, and it's making changes to that action that are not kind of germane to those programs. Does that make sense? Or vice
Yeah.
versa?
Okay, how many of those, just out of curiosity?
I think I have 4, 3 or 4.
Okay. All right, folks. So we've got ourselves a little punch list here.
David, I have one
Oh yeah, Jay, I'll jump in. Sorry.
one more action that I would just like to see, I don't know, I guess scrapped. That's line 33. It's incentivize in-state purchase of carbon credits. I don't feel like that's representative of what we're trying to do. I think it goes against what we're trying to do. And then the methane digesters, I'm a little concerned about that because for those to really run, you need a lot of manure. I think we're trying to move away from huge amounts of manure, and it's a huge investment for farmers. So I just don't feel like that's the best recommendation either.
Okay. All right, guys, we need to start working on these. See how we do. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, but this is the list I'll be working off of. Okay. We're just going to work through it. I don't have a better way than just start from the top. We just need to recognize that each one of these we could spend an hour on, but we actually need to spend about 3 to 5 minutes on. Let's see how we do. We'll break for public comment at 1:15, so in about 10 minutes, and then we'll pick it back up. All right. Let's talk about the language stuff that, and Stephen, that's an old hand, right? I'm not missing you. Okay, thanks. All right, so let's talk about the language of working lands. First of all, that's language that's sort of literally in the title of some state programs and things like that. I guess what I'm hearing, Earl, is you would like to see in the way we present our recommendations that we don't use that phrase of working lands. We just talk about lands, right? And then I'm curious, like as a recommendation, this may come up for the payment for ecological services as well. it may be that you're trying to suggest there's a recommendation here that as a state, we start to move away from this, even though today it could be literally the name of the program. I think that's what you're trying to say, Earl, right?
Yes, I would advance services to ecosystems
Okay,
as a substitute for payment for eco services.
got it. Okay,
I understand that there's payment involved because this is a program that the state and the Fed, put money into, and I understand the use of that term, but it's been co-opted by Wall Street and the carbon traders. And
got
so
it.
it's very difficult to separate that, especially when we're talking to, the groups and folks that we work with on the ground here in Vermont. They're seeing this as a huge red flag every time government says it.
Got it.
And so what I keep getting swamped with is Vermont is in the middle of carbon trading, and they're promoting carbon trading through PES.
Yeah.
And that's why I've been harping on it since I've been on this committee. And one of the reasons I joined the committee is because I wanted to see if this was actually true, and where Vermont is really going. And so this was my window into how this is working.
Right.
And I understand, and in talking with NRCS, I see where the carbon trading within USDA is coming from. And I see that Vermont is separating from that. You're talking about CSP programs, and so I really appreciate that. In order to help sell what we're doing to all the folks that I work with, all the groups that I'm on, uh, it would be really helpful if we could just separate further from that term, and then other folks, everyone would be more comfortable with the direction that we're going.
Thanks.
That's my suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Ryan, you're in the middle of this because these are program names. It's sort of common terminology that's been used. I wonder, Ryan, when you think about this, how to address Earl's concern, both in the way we talk about it in this document and any kind of recommendation we might make.
David, would you be able to put that
Doc up? Yeah.
your notes on, because these are all agriculture, right? Everyone's complaining about. And
Oh, you want to see?
I just want, yeah, could you share them? Because I've had to respond to like 7 of them, and I can answer them all. I can go into as much detail as folks want, but I'm going to start high level to try to answer all of these with one go. And my appeal is to please think of the size and scale of Vermont and what Vermont can control at the state level. And please think of the humans on the ground doing the work of farming and cutting trees, right? We cannot ignore the reality that the system that we live under has created for us, which is a privatized, industrialized food system, right? Like that is what predicates this whole system functioning. And so changing names, changing terms is not going to change the structures behind it. We as a subcommittee, I think should be focused on practicable, cost-effective recommendations that will make a meaningful difference for the goals that we've laid out. And I think arguing about terms that are well established in state law, are part of 10-year state programs. We had 3 years of farmers at the table discussing payment for ecosystem services. And at the end of the day, economics is real. If you're not profitable, you can't keep doing it, whether it's farming or logging, what have you. And so putting the people that are doing this work at the center of the plan so they can see themselves in it to some degree or another, I think is an important consideration. And so that is where those that self-identify as a farmer, those that self-identify as a logger, we're going to have many more people in Vermont, from my experience, that are going to identify with those terms than being a land manager. If you explain it, they might say, sure, I'm a land manager, but that's not how they conceive of themselves. And so there is no magic definition for farms. There is one for farming, there's other definitions, but if you want to be a farmer, you can see yourself in this, because the state should support those that are engaged in farming to adapt and, where possible, use strategies that will provide both, mitigation to greenhouse gases and resilience benefits. And so working lands, long established 10 years. PES, 3 years of farmers saying we want this term. Pesticides, I encourage folks to go to the Ag Innovation Board meetings, AIB. That is where the group of experts on pesticides get together to talk about these issues. And I don't think this, especially on the last day, I don't think this is the right group to get into that conversation. 100% agree, right? My argument is put farmers at the middle. How much time do they have to do these programs to learn what's going to work? Not a lot, because as you know, we've heard time and again, profitability is missing. And so I see the workload on farmers, you know, that I see that as part of the why all 3 of the groups had education, outreach, and TA. If we want to be more discreet about what that outcome is, which is farmers get support and they get more bandwidth, I think that'd be great to write in there. Forestry, yes, 80% of the state of Vermont is forested. And, you know, we didn't have a forester on our committee. Seems like an oversight. We're at the end of the game. This is what we got. Research and monitoring, the scale of Vermont. We are a population of 600-odd thousand. The metro area of Syracuse, New York, has more population than us, or just about the same, right? Like that's the scale of impact you can have without federal money coming into the state. And so I just, when we talk about complete ecosystems, we have a whole section 3 that emphasizes natural lands, that emphasizes those that are unmanaged and those priorities. Why can't we have a section that calls out those people that actively manage land as their job and livelihood, and call out what they need? You know, we've put the wetlands program into the first one. Last year, that was all about greenhouse gas emissions, because agriculture is the only sector in the AFOLU which has an emission reduction the way the GWSA was written. You know, we're trying to be holistic, and so it's totally great to have all the supporting programs listed in one place. But I do think that, you know, why can't we emphasize both the benefits, the threats, and the opportunity in agriculture and in forestry? And as far as missing language, I think one of the task group 1 recommendations is about land use protection and access, but I think group 2 might have some more in there. But I do see that as reflected and as a key outcome of the 4th recommendation from the first group, I believe. And I think I'm going to, you know, I think I'm going to stop there. But yeah. Really, really sorry to ramble on about this. I just wanted to get it all out there. That's why these words are in here, and that's why this framing exists. This is trying to be practicable, implementable, and responsive to the reality of Vermont, not the ideal that we want to see. You know, we can put down what the ideal is, but to get there, we have to work with what we have. And so that's why these recommendations are focused on, you know, in this way. So, thank you.
Okay. So in terms of the languages, we stick to these 2 for the moment. And I'm going to stop sharing this doc. It sounds like there's some real concerns about shifting language that's established language in the state, and established language for farmers or others. That said, Earl, on the second issue of the PES, the program, the Payments for Ecological Services, I wonder if there's something we could, some language we could come up with, even if it doesn't change the term of it, that signals like, this is what it is, this is what it isn't, right? So you have some really solid thing to stand on to say, this is what it is, this is what it isn't. And we could have that as part of the recommendation. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think in, excuse me, it's in line number 6. I think that's the second working group, or the end of the first working group, where you explain PES, and you have the statements in there that it's not connected with carbon trading. That is helpful, and I like that. I don't know how that would translate out. I know you'd be passing that on to the Climate Council, but I don't know how that gets out to the broader community so that they can learn and understand that that's what Vermont means. And so that's why I was suggesting maybe an evolution of the term, you know, based on what's going on right now. There's no reason why government can't evolve as the people evolves, as we all evolve with the coming climate crisis. government can evolve as well. And so changing a term is part of that evolution. I don't understand why we're locked into place and can't evolve. But if we are, then how does that explanation that you have in there move forward and get to the broader community so that everyone understands where we're coming from?
That's great. And then in terms of working lands, I mean, this is something where there's been some back and forth on this. And I'd be curious, like, if there's a way of just, like, if what would be lost in this document if that term went away from this document, except for specific titles of programs that use it. Like, would it be possible to do that and not lose what the meaning of what folks are trying to say? So I'd be curious to play with that for a second in terms of working lands.
Yeah, if I may, just dropping the term working.
Yeah.
All throughout this document, we're talking about forestry and agriculture. That's everywhere. And so the other thing is there's from USDA down to all the rural Vermont and all the groups that I work with, there's a notion being, an idea being put forward, or a policy that's being put forward about set aside lands, whether it's on a farmland, a farmer setting aside a stand of timber, or it's setting aside our national forests, our state forests, our private forests, and not allowing extraction in those areas. Folks that do that, and the state and the Fed does that, okay, that's still working lands, because what we're allowing is for nature to work and develop into old growth. And as individuals want to do that, they're not being incentivized to do that. And so why can't they be incentivized to set aside forests without having to thin it in order to get payments? And so
so I just
they
need to
also need help and assistance with that. And so there'll be payments involved with that. But these set aside lands are working for us. They're providing ecological services to all of us and all the creatures that depend on the forest. And so with that movement involved, that's why I say working lands is defined as forested agriculture, but not set aside. And so that's why the term working is kind of a hang up.
Got it. Okay. So we're at the time we said we'd do some public comments. So I'd like to do that. And we'll circle back. I really encourage folks, let's spend a little bit more time on language, but let's not let this eat us alive, because we've got some other content we need to work on today. And again, this could be one thing where several of you, we transmit up to the council, like, hey, several are very concerned about language. These are some of the concerns they have. You should know that, even if you're not all aligned on that. I want to take a pause for public comment because we said we'd do it at 1:15. If you've been joining us today and you'd like to comment in on some of the things we've been talking about, this is a great time to do it. So I'd encourage folks, if you're not a subcommittee member and you'd like to chime in, let's take a moment here. Happy to hear thoughts from folks who are here today. Let me just take a moment. Cheryl Joe, I just saw you came off mute.
Yeah, but I don't see. Are you seeing me?
No, your camera's not working right now, but we can hear you.
I know. It's my daughter's thing. And
that's okay.
maybe there you go.
Now we got you. Yeah.
Sorry. Joining from Jesse's laptop down in Florida.
Okay.
I hear it's cold up there.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to point out, I guess, is that there have been foresters on this. I put it in the chat, but I don't think you guys are addressing the chat. So I want it to be, spoken out loud also. You have had foresters on the committee in the past. It's only recently that there's not a forester, that you've had a lot of input from that. And you have not had an ecologist. Well, you might have had an ecologist, but You don't now, and you did not. You've had biologists and different things like that. But I don't think I remember another ecologist. I also want to say that I agree with the terminology changes. There have been talk about, there has been a recommendation since the first cap to change the language, and especially with regard to working lands, and that's been brought up a bunch of times from committee members, several different committee members in the beginning all the way until now, and also public comment. There also have been comments and about, and I think that it should be addressed greatly, the conflicts between compact settlement actions and floodplains and land, lands that you protect and conserve, because those things are so intertwined, since a lot of the settlements came around areas that really along rivers and in floodplains. So that's another thing that should be brought to the forefront. I missed some of the meeting. I tried to listen to most of it, but I'm multitasking. So thanks.
Thanks, Shell Joy. Anybody else have comments today? Okay, I'm not seeing additional ones.
I actually just want to add a little tiny bit. Can you please tell me if we had an ecologist on the committee starting in the beginning? I know there are a couple of people who have been here from since the beginning, and I would like to make sure that you all acknowledge and know about the foresters, plural, that have been on the committee since that came up. I'd like comments about that.
Yeah, so Andrew is an ecologist, Cheryl.
Oh, that's right. Now, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Great. Okay.
The foresters, sorry.
What you're looking for, Cheryl.
For the initial climate action plan, we had Charlie Hancock, who's a consulting forester, and some others with forestry expertise. I think we had some folks early on in this update, but they had to drop off the group, unfortunately. We've tried to confer with people to the extent we've been able to, but yeah, that's certainly currently a gap on the subcommittee. So thanks for flagging that, Cheryl. But a lot of the existing cap recommendations were informed by folks with deep forestry backgrounds, including Ali Kasiba, who was a climate forester, and Charlie Hancock, who was a private consulting forester. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, sure. And lacking the ecology. And actually, now we have Andrew, and I'm sorry, Andrew, I didn't mean to leave you off.
Excellent. Let's get back into it. I would love to spend only a few more minutes on the language thing. What I'm sensing is with the payment for ecological services, that is something where we can absolutely make sure that the definitions are transmitted clearly alongside any time that's mentioned. For working lands, I'd be curious if folks would be, if there's any concern with, for the way you present language, to not use that terminology, knowing that it is deeply embedded in the language of the sector. So I'm just curious about that. And then I'd love to move on to some of these other pieces. Judy and Jake, you've had your hands up for a while. Judy, over to you.
Yeah, this, as everybody stated before, the language issue has come up from the very beginning, in part because forestry, conservation went hand in hand with Roosevelt and eugenics. And so a lot of the words that are used in those areas come directly from the conservation work that eugenicists did. And last time we were given a paper to read called, hang on, Culling the Herd, Eugenics and the Conservation Movement in the United States from 1900 to 1940. And in Vermont, there's a book called Rural Vermont, and it was done by the Vermont Eugenics Program. And they specifically in 1931 addressed these words and how this was a period of time to better the working lands and the working people in Vermont. And that's why people were institutionalized and sterilized. And so for me, this is where I'm coming from with all of these words. I appreciate that Earl has narrowed it down to 2, but there's too many words that are inappropriate and hateful and have been used historically to malign Indigenous people in this state. Myself being my family, 623 people in my family were institutionalized and many were sterilized. This has got to stop. If kids can change language every year, we should be able to change some of this language. And I'm telling you, if you don't accept change, Ryan, it'll pass you by.
Okay. Jake?
Yeah, so one thing that that we tried to do for the priorities in our task group 2, and I don't know if we were wholly successful in this, was, I think acknowledging that working lands is a shorthand for, the way it's used in Vermont currently is shorthand for like sort of farm and food sector, or the farm and food economy. And so wherever that word was used in actions or strategies in our section, I think we just tried to change it and to use those specific sector terms of farm and food, like we're talking about the farm and forest sector. The only thing that we didn't change with that is the actual name of the Working Lands program, because that is the program name. So I would suggest that we could just, and I think this is actually better for us to do, is to not use shorthand as much as possible and to just be as specific as we can be. So in cases where we see that term in an action that's not referring to the program, we can just expound upon that and say, and be specific about what we're talking about: farm, forest economy, land managers, ecosystem managers, whatever other terms we want to use, and add to that. So that would be a suggestion, at least for addressing the working lands kind of language issue.
Thanks, Jake. Great. So I think that's good to test with all of us, because quickly, if we can imagine in the way we use the language, could we be more specific and not use working lands as a shorthand? And that would be an interesting exercise for everyone to go through the document and do that. Ryan, I'd love to finish up this piece on language. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, I got called out specifically. I feel like I should get to say something in defense, being accused of not wanting to change. Like, has anyone read the October 24th, 2024 report from the IPCC about projected future warming of the world? Right, like 34% to 3 degrees Celsius, right? This is why I don't want to argue about language. I want to talk about people and what do people need. I do not think this is a productive conversation. And Jake, I really appreciate the, okay, well, I appreciate the recommendations you made, Jake, and maybe that's neutral enough language that we can get through this committee and, can get to talking about some programs that can actually help prepare Vermont for what's coming. And Judy, with the resignation of the commissioner of Public Service Department, right, my understanding of what she was recommending is focusing on how to make the state of Vermont more resilient to a changing climate. And to do that, and to extreme weather events, and to do that, we need our farmers, we need our land managers. And rural sociology is the thing. You have to speak in a way that people feel seen and heard and can want to participate in this process. So trying to keep as open a door as possible to those that want to, come along, I think is, a good instinct that, folks should think about. So thanks.
Okay, so this is a tough issue, and I appreciate folks spending a little time on it. What I'm taking away from the purposes of this group today is that on the issue of working lands and that language in the document, let's try to be more specific and not use it as a shorthand for what we really mean. And on the language of program payment for ecological services, let's make sure that the definition of what we're talking about, what we're not talking about, goes with the mention of that anytime we're putting that out there. And those seem like ways that you all as a full committee could move forward. And as you go forward, the issue of language probably will evolve further. I want to go down a few more on our punch list of things to do. In terms of the pesticide piece, Ryan, you said there's a group that's sort of best able to look at that. You all do have a pesticide recommendation, right? And it's for developing a program and tracking, et cetera. And so I'm just want to be super clear, Jael, are you saying that in that recommendation, which already has 3 subpoints,
It says an assessment hasn't been done in terms of climate. I'm sorry, I can't find. I'm just trying to recall climate impact or something.
Yeah, I can open it up. Hang on a sec. I'll share.
And so what I'm saying is just like, can we recommend that that assessment is done?
Okay. So what it would mean is changing this. Hang on, I'm sorry, my screen's not doing what it wants to do. There we go. Programs to track these agriculture inputs already exist in blah, 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 but have not been assessed through the lens of contribution to climate change, right? Priorities, assessment of impacts. Can prioritize, right? It's like basically you'd say, you know, we encourage the blah, blah, blah to assess these things through that lens as well as human health is what you're trying to ask and a line in this, right?
So, all right, so the newly established Agriculture Innovation Board, they can prioritize that assessment, but how's that actually happen?
Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe Ryan knows the answer to that.
And yeah, but also human health and like the impact of soil health too.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I did send around that article, that research paper that looked at the impact of glyphosate on mycorrhizal fungi, which is integral in sequestering carbon. And so if we're killing all our mycorrhizal fungi, it's not able to sequester that carbon. So I just feel like there needs to be a little more of a deep dive.
So let me just check in with task group 1, folks. If this second sentence in the second bullet were changed to, you know, recommend that the Agriculture Innovation Board assess based on climate and human health impacts, does that make sense within the reality of what this board is doing or should be doing?
I think the regulation of PFAS is far more important, you know, topic area that warrants study and money. We have no money. We have no staff. Like, we don't use a lot of pesticides in Vermont, and pesticides cover more than just corn, right? Biocides, disinfectants, golf courses, nurseries, highway, railway, mosquito, right? Like pesticides are everywhere in everything we do. And so calling out farmers and their usage when it's really, anyways.
And Ryan, I don't want to call out just farmers.
I
want to call out the whole system in terms of our overuse of, you know, on golf courses, on like garden spaces, on, you know, I think it all should be assessed.
But to what end? I mean, anyways, it's a federally regulated. I mean, you can change whatever you. I mean, that's fine. I don't support.
Well, and I don't understand exactly the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a board that looks at this, and you know, it's definitely a lens through which they analyze Again, I'm not on the AIB. We'd have to get someone from the agency that runs it, Steve Doyle on farm. He can come in and talk all about, the intersection here and what they're doing. If you want to change it to recommend, like, okay, change it to recommend. That's fine. You send it to the AIB, and maybe they can look some more at it.
Why don't we do something here where we change it to, if other folks on the committee feel compelled by this, change it to that. And we know we need to make a note to reach out and be like, is this reasonable, right? And I think that could be a flag in this sheet, right, of pending work to do. So I'm just curious, for other folks on the subcommittee, would you be comfortable altering this sentence here that my cursor is over to speak about sort of a recommendation around an assessment of the impacts of pesticide use and from a climate and human health standpoint? Anybody have a problem with that?
No, I just want to point out Stephen's Leslie's comment in the chat, because it is, USDA is relying a lot on glyphosate for no-till, but I'm just concerned that we're going to rely on this application of this herbicide that's going to cause a lot more damage in the long run. So I don't want us to start relying on this technology or this management practice and then find ourselves having to clean that up.
Yeah.
I just want to point out the State of Soil Health in 2022 did a statewide analysis of all types of different fields, and corn on average has a higher organic matter content than vegetables. You can still put organic matter in the soil when you use pesticides in Vermont because we have a very productive climate. We have a lot of livestock manure. And so practically for Vermont, the obstacles that we have to getting more carbon in the ground, I would rate pesticides as a low obstacle. The biggest obstacle is funding for farmers to do practices that are not profitable, have a benefit for the climate. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as far as what is the practical implications of Vermont soils do a good job of putting soil in the ground or carbon in the ground.
Okay.
Which is exactly why I've been advocating to look at the bigger picture, not just farmers and foresters. I mean, we went round around last summer because they wanted to put that on the hedgerow in front of our house that was 20 feet away from our well. And each individual neighbor got a vote. And so you found yourself advocating to your neighbors to vote no to protect your well. We got to start looking at the bigger issue, not just farmers and foresters, but how all of this is connected. You pull on one thing in nature and the rest of the world is connected.
So in summary, it sounds like we can add a change in this line 26 about recommending this type of assessment that looks at the climate and human health aspects of this. And we'll put a caveat in the document as well that we actually haven't spoken to that board yet to see how aligned that is with what they're trying to do. I'd be interested to go, and Cheryl, I see your hand, but we're kind of chugging along here in the subcommittee at this point. So that's why I'm not calling on you. The next thing on my list here is about the workload on farmers and the accessibility funding opportunities. I think as Ryan mentioned, we have a bunch here around technical assistance and other kind of stuff, and we have that combined action that pulls from all three. And maybe if I just pull that up for a second, we could see if that is actually solved, if that's enough, or if there's, hang on just a second. This is the combined action from all three work groups around education outreach, research, technical assistance. Right, I'm just reading along while you're reading it. So I wonder, Jael, for instance, is there something like maybe in this that it's like talking about the you know, finding ways to reduce the workload and the accessibility hurdles to participating in programs, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a brief mention of technical assistant, but yeah, more about workload and putting money towards programs that are going to actually help hire those workers to help farmers with those contracts. I mean, I don't know, it's complex, but farmers get contracts through NRCS, but they have to have someone from NRCS, a conservation planner, write those contracts, and they're understaffed. And so a lot of state agencies take that up. But there's not the workload or the workforce out there.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand. Are we talking about the work that farmers have to go through to apply to programs and access programs and sort of the hurdles? Are we talking about the workforce of actually working on the land?
No, working with farmers to help them get their NRCS contracts.
Got it. So what if we put a line in there that said something like support farmers to access programs and funds and manage, and diminish and reduce the workload and to access these programs, kind of thing, something like that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that if we do a line that says something like that, either in here or somewhere else?
I mean, I just want to point out millions and millions and millions of dollars that were never allocated before Act 64 of 2015. Those to fund conservation districts, UVM extension, farmer watershed groups in general that aren't farmers, to do this education outreach. We talked about ombudsman, right? That was the recommendation that came out of some group. I can't recall this one or another one. I just am concerned that putting language, I mean, relative to the size of Vermont, there's a lot of investment going in here. I think a lot of other states, even with much bigger ag, footprint, would be very envious of the amount of resources the small state like Vermont put towards this work. And so absolutely support more. Just want to make sure that it's noted that there is a recent significant expansion of investment in this, and it has been successful. And so that's why it's worth more investment in that area. So just want to call that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, working group. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ryan, but it just from what I've been doing, we've worked with a lot of farmers who are basically saying they haven't been able to access these grants because they don't, they get forgotten, they get dropped, all kinds of different reasons. And I just feel like, and maybe what Jake said, simplify and provide assistance.
Yeah. I'm just going to cut and paste that line out of here. Again, this is in the spirit of making progress, folks. We're going to have to just be mindful of the amount of time we have right now. But it sounds like what would work is a line like what Jake just put in, which is simplify and provide assistance with application processes for funding and support programs. That sound good? Okay, great. The next thing we had was define farmer. And I think I heard two things. One is there are statutory definitions that are applicable for different kinds of programs, right? And then I heard the other thing is this is kind of self-definition here too, people who see themselves. So I don't know if there's anything we need to do as a subcommittee to say, hey, when we use the word farmer here or forester, this is what we mean. Maybe there's a line that we could add that would be helpful. Any thoughts on that? Like in a typical program, a typical document like this, would it define a term like that?
Sometimes it does. Because what if you have a beginning farmer or a beginning gardener who wants to become a farmer and wants to apply for some of the assistance you're talking about? And then you have some of the criteria that's been put into the chat box has been all about money, 50% of your income, or the USDA says this, or it's all about money. So how do you get to that point if you're not where all of the things we're saying can be helpful to you if you're a gardener and want to become a farmer?
So
That's the beauty of vague terms.
Yeah.
It's inclusive, right? A farmer is whoever wants to call themselves
It's a
that.
big
Let's move
tent.
on.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
isn't that? That's not the definition. The definition has been put in the box, in the chat
There's
box.
no
And
definition in this document, Judy.
what?
There's been no definition in the initial climate action plan to define a farmer. This isn't a piece of legislation. There's no benefit that people will derive from qualifying for identifying as a farmer in this first term. I don't see it as a salient point that would affect how people read it. Like it's not going to do
It
anything.
seems
It's just
exclusive to me.
Just to clarify, any land manager within like a natural resources conservation district can access funds if they go through, they, if they want to do riparian buffer or something, they don't have to be a farmer.
nope, just a willing landowner.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think my instinct here is there is no definition that is appropriate for every time we use it. It's sort of like this broad definition, and whether individual programs have individual cutoffs or not about what it means to be a farmer. It sounds like there's different kinds of programs out there.
There's different kinds of definitions that are assigned monetary values.
Okay.
Somebody put 2,000. Somebody said 50% of your income.
Okay. I think here the issue
Those
is
are examples from specific programs that are not the purview of this subcommittee. Those were examples of how a farmer could be defined. As Billy said, I think we're not restricting who could call themselves a farmer or what have you in this document, right? We don't put in the beginning, you must be this to be a farmer, you must be this to be a logger. It's not present as a disqualifier or a qualifier, as I read it.
right. So providing that sort of big umbrella allows for people to see themselves in the document. And we're not going to, in this document, change the way the USDA does it or someone else does it. We're just saying we're allowing people to see themselves. So if folks are okay, I'd say it sounds like it actually is helpful in this document not to restrict a definition, but just to let people see themselves in it and self-identify. Is that okay? There's a couple things, why don't we jump to that one where when we talk about, and I think this is something you brought up, Judy, it's like there's a lot of mentions of farmers and foresters. And then one of the nice things that subgroup 3 did was get to that land caretakers language, right? And so I wonder if throughout your subcommittee product, if you're inspired to use the words farmers and foresters, you would add a third there to farmers, foresters, and land caretakers and other land caretakers, right? So that way you could do that broader mention of folks who might see themselves in a different view than, say, a farmer, forester, but is still interacting with the land. So I wonder if folks are okay with that. Right, land and water. Okay. Right, so there's a lot of mentions in the document where you talk about farmers and foresters. And would you all, as a subcommittee, be comfortable when you do those kinds of mentions, change that mentions to be farmers, foresters, and other land and water caretakers? Does that sound reasonable? Any concerns with that?
It sounds more inclusive.
Great. Any concerns with it? Ryan?
I have concerns. Why can't the people that are farming and logging be called out for the work they're doing and the specific attention they need at scale compared to homeowners or those whose livelihood doesn't depend on the very fickle weather pattern and bad soils in the state? I have no objection with calling out, everyone that works land or, well, that's the wrong word, anyways, exists on the land, can participate in these programs, but I why can we call out wetlands, but we can't call out farmers, right? Like wetlands and river corridors, things that take farmland and take it out of production to never be returned to agriculture. You know, that's a climate solution, but we can't call out farmers who are really struggling right now and need support. Like I don't get it. So no objection. I just don't think it should be there in this recommendation. But that's just my perspective. Thanks.
Okay. Noted. Thanks, Ryan. It sounds like the idea here is to add more in, not take things away. And so, again, farmers, foresters get named. And then there's this additional net that can be cast. And obviously there are state programs that are specific for different kinds of folks, right? So specific for farmers or specific for foresters. Okay. There's a couple other things on my punch list I want to just go through as we're finishing up here. One was about, Andrew mentioned about regional and local planning. The good news there, Andrew, is that there was an entire cross-cutting group around compact settlement that dealt with that stuff. So some of you might have participated in that group, I'm not sure. But there's a whole set of recommendations that came out and the council looked at the priority ones and there's a bunch of stuff happening there. So that is dealt with, Andrew. You should feel confident that that was looked at. And a bunch of folks from different subcommittees participated in that process. On the missing something around forestry and climate adaptation for forestry, I mean, there is, Andrew, do you want to jump in on that? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to save some time. I brought those three things I brought up: climate adaptation, forestry, regional development planning, and research and monitoring as things that didn't emerge through the prioritization process, but that needed continued attention. And as long as they're still going to be in our overall set of recommendations that's forwarded to the council, I don't think we need to have further discussion. That I thought we were flagging things that weren't priorities that we thought still needed attention. So that's why I brought those things up. So
perfect. Okay, that solves it. Thank you. Yeah, everything gets forwarded, and some things even got even more attention in that cross-cutting group. Okay. Access to land for new farmers, etc. Did anybody find that in what we have in either subgroup 2? Like Jake, did you guys do that?
There was an action related to like a retirement program for farmers that got changed to like more of a study by group 3. I saw I believe there's some reference to an intergenerational transfer, implementing an intergenerational transfer report from some years ago. So there were some actions scattered throughout that focused either directly or tangentially on this topic. I don't have them in front of me, but I did see them when I reviewed them earlier.
Okay. All right. So there are some things in there, and I think that's important to note. All right. Billy, you had mentioned there's a couple things where there's some specific actions about a program that's underway that then broaden that to a place where it's uncomfortable because that program isn't really about that. Do you want to share what those are? I can share my screen if you want me to.
Yeah, it feels like this isn't the best use of time right now, but I'll try to be really brief. So they're from the task group 3.
You just give me some lines.
I'll give you the line item. So line 8, that changes the name from maintaining and creating resilient forests to restoring. The maintaining and creating resilient forests is an actual document that exists that was being referenced. So, and I can put the link in the chat to that. So it seemed like changing that name didn't make sense since that's a real thing.
Thanks.
Let's see, the next one is line 24. This is a strategy. So it's not even an action, it's an overarching strategy. The task group's recommending that to I believe, be limited only to nature-based solutions because it kicks off utilize nature-based solutions to increase flood resilience. It needs to be broader than that. You know, while nature-based solutions are certainly important, there are strategies in how we build and do things that aren't nature-based that are flood resilient that need to be captured here.
You utilize nature-based and other solutions.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. It's just like, because some of these actions relate to like transportation infrastructure and other things where, you know, we're building things in certain ways that are more resilient. But yeah, nature-based is certainly an important component of all that work.
I just
And
want to pause for folks. Is that people understand that challenge here is that yes to nature-based solutions and keep the door open to other things that you wouldn't necessarily qualify as that. Okay.
Okay, and then I think my last one is
Wait, can
lines.
we say something
Sure.
like other things that complement nature-based? Because there's
Sure.
several things that are done that cause more problems in other often.
Yep.
Great.
That's
So we utilize nature-based and other programs that complement nature-based solutions. Yeah.
that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
And then the last one is line 75. The action is focused on supporting development, you know, in places that avoid natural resource impacts effectively. And the revised language is focusing it on just low-income housing. But it's broader than just low-income housing. It's, you know, market rate housing, it's commercial retail, it's other forms of development within these growth centers. So it seemed like an appropriate constraint.
So again, this might be a similar thing to the nature-based solutions where low-income housing is certainly a part of it, but is not
Yes.
the only part, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that could be done, you know, to support low-income housing and other, you know,
Forms
goals,
of
whatever it
development.
is.
Yeah,
Okay.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody tracking that, what that is? Okay.
Great. And that's it for me. And I'm putting in the chat that report that was referenced that has the specific name. So
That's great. Thanks for the detailed read there. Okay. Great. So let's quickly look at my list and see how we're doing. There's two things that were suggested to be removed. Again, we're pumping up against the top of the hour here, but one was about line 33, state purchase of carbon credits. I assume that's the first table.
yes.
Okay, hang on a second.
Line 33 on the first table.
Yeah. Here we go. No action taken. Does anybody have a concern of just dropping that? No action's been taken. Sounds like carbon credits are something that this subcommittee at least has a hard time building consensus around. Any concerns about just dropping this one, letting this one go away? Ryan, you still with us as well?
I think we can certainly flag that the subcommittee doesn't support this concept, and since there's been no action, that we recommend it going away. You know, there may be others on the council who have insight into this, but I think that's a fine outcome based on everything we've been discussing.
Okay. Any other concerns about that if we got rid of this? Okay. And then the next one was on the biodigesters. I don't know what line that is.
I forget too, and I couldn't find it. It's somewhere, I think in there, in task group 1.
Line 10.
There it goes. Found it. Implement methane capture and energy generation on farms. Oh, it's an EG anyway.
Yeah, anaerobic digester. I'm concerned about those because it requires a lot of manure, and our mission is to move away from stockpiling manure and to get, you know, intensive grazing practices implemented. I don't know. I don't want us to put the state to put a lot of investment in building these anaerobic digesters. I'm just concerned that money and resources will go to it when it's not the best strategy, in my opinion.
Okay, so this is an ongoing program. It's being implemented. It's an EG. Ryan, you put your hand up. Jump in, please.
Biogas collection and utilization is the only greenhouse gas emission reduction practice that is currently counted in the state of Vermont greenhouse gas emission inventory. All of the farms that can handle digesters have them, large farms. We have a grant from REAP to work on building a small farm cohort. As long as we have water quality regulations and we have livestock, that manure is going to need to be stored in a safe way. If you do dairy or you feed high energy inputs, you're going to need to collect that as liquid. Plus, if you have a barnyard, you need to collect that. So liquid storage is more often than not, unfortunately, the result of our farming system today. And so to call out that biogas digesters are there as a technology that is voluntary, right? We have 3 new ones that are going in, one on the MFO, maybe the other one's in the MFO too, but we're getting some mid-sized digesters being funded through REAP and USDA and other places. So I think it is a fine recommendation to include, and I think it is the only one that's counted right now, so for agriculture. So to lose that recommendation, I think would be problematic. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. That's really helpful context. And I think in that context, Jael, with this idea of sort of like mid-sized ones that are addressing your concern of sort of like, you know, are we incentivizing more manure production? How about leaving this in since it is a existing program? Does that work?
Yeah, I'm just concerned, like if we're really trying to incentivize rotational grazing, intensive grazing, and the cows are out, you know, on the land more, how, like, these digesters are going to run out of manure, and then what happens? I don't know. I just like long-term strategy in terms of trying to reshape our farm system to be more, you know, aligned with our ecosystems. But go ahead, Ryan.
And I just want to call out scale. If you're financed for 700 cows, you got to produce the revenue for 700 cows. You're going to need a collection, and biogas digester is a way to make energy while reducing methane emissions from the manure storage. It's not something that drives concentration. It's something that is a management tool for farms that reach that size. And there are lots of examples in Europe of small farms and, you know, Central America. There's lots of small farms that use biogas digesters. And if you could use it for heat to heat your home and your neighbors and get paid for that, like I think there's a lot of opportunity for small scale, kind of rural utilization could be a good energy security approach and strategy. So I think we can be creative and flexible, not flexible, but like broad pen on what qualifies. It's not just the large farms. No, we got to look for the medium and small ones and make sure it works for them and that doesn't bankrupt them, right? Because the biggest issue is that operation and management. So that's what, you know, we're trying to do is figure out ways to have these incredibly expensive technologies serve the needs of farms. Because unfortunately, you got to store your manure appropriately in the state. You don't have to in other states, but you do here.
All right, folks. It seems like it makes sense to leave this in if there's some caveats or anything folks would want to add, but it seems like there's some logic going on there that works for various size. All right, so we're about to run out. We have officially run out of time. We have done almost everything in the list. I can show you my notes just so it's really clear how I've been taking notes on this. And then let's talk a second about next steps. And thanks everyone for being willing to stay another 5 minutes or so. So language on working lands via specifically can be, don't use term as a shorthand. Language on PES, ensure the definition is communicated out to the broader community, and obviously whenever you're mentioning it, Pesticides, we can add that change to line 26, but we need to put a caveat that we actually haven't spoken to that board. So we think it's a good idea, but we're not quite, we just haven't done all our work on that one. On the workload to farmers, we can add this sentence in to our priority recommendation of simplify and provide assistance with application processes for funding and support programs. Define farmer, actually, it may be beneficial to leave it vague and have people see themselves in this document and not try to be specific about one definition in particular. And talking about not just farmers and foresters, be a little broader. This is something that, not everyone on this committee loves this change. It is irritating to some people to make this change. And yet it seems like there's a critical mass on the subcommittee around using a broader definition when we talk about farmers and foresters to add in other land and water caretakers, just like the group 3 has been doing. Is there missing language around access to land for new farmers? Actually, we think we got this. We think it's in there. Specific examples of existing actions that speak to a program underway. This was Billy's things. We fixed all 3. I don't have the details of how we fixed them, but we got through them all 3. Remove the purchase of carbon credits. Yeah, let's remove it. Methane digesters, let's leave them in. Our biodigesters, let's leave it in. So those are the punch list items of the issues that you wanted to dive into. That was very hard to do. Thank you all. I guess let's just talk about next steps. Billy, Jael, what do you want to say about next steps?
I don't know. I think we've got a deadline from the council to deliver the full, all the stuff. So we need to spend some time cleaning up the spreadsheets and templates based on the conversation today. And then I don't know exactly when that deadline is. You might know, David, but we need to get it out relatively quickly.
In about a week or so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we could certainly try to share it with folks when we do that, and potentially a little sooner if we've got the time. But after that, I don't know. I think we are kind of on pause. Thanks, Evan. So we need to do that by next week. So hopefully we can circulate that an updated version before next Friday, get any kind of red flag concerns from people if we got stuff wrong, but otherwise we'll assume we got it right. And then I think we're kind of on pause for a while until we get any specific questions or directives from the council, as far as I understand it.
That's how I understand it too, Billy, is that the council may be like, hey, folks, can you help us with this thing, right? We're trying to fix this issue or whatever. So they may come back to you and ask for some help in the coming weeks, months. Council's working hard to finish up a draft version of the whole package by late March. And then there's a big period in April of going out to do a bunch of public engagement and outreach around that draft. And you all can be helpful partners in doing that and bringing it out to constituencies and helping the Climate Action Office figure out ways of talking to people. So that's going to be a big piece in the coming, over the next 3 months or so. So I think that's it. Anything else before we finish up, folks? Anything else? Okay. All right. An enormous amount of effort. The hours that you all put into this are extraordinary, and they are not well compensated. We'll just say that. And so I think, the council and the state of Vermont is very much in your debt. Certainly expect something from your co-chairs with the documents that are going to go up to the council. Hopefully we can get those out in the next week or so. I think that's it. Jael, anything else from you? Okay. And Evan, am I misstating anything from the Climate Action Office standpoint?
No, that all sounds good.
Okay. It feels like there should be some moment for you all to put some closure on all this work. It's not done yet, but it's nearly done. And so I think if there's interest in that, let's think about what that might look like for you all. Some sort of gathering or some sort of way to feel like you have a sense of a closure around this big effort that you've been doing over the last period of time,
Yeah,
almost a year now.
I think that'd be great if we could find a brief period for us to get back together over Zoom or whatnot, just to kind of check in on next steps and close out this phase of the work.
Right, and take a look at how the council used all this content.
Yep.
Okay, so stay tuned for that. And if folks have good ideas about how to do that, very welcome. Send those to Billy, JL, me, or anybody. Okay. Jake, I see something in the chat here. I'm just going to put that in my notes, and hopefully it's not controversial.
Yeah, yeah, no, I don't think it is. It's and I was speaking to Andrew talking about farmland access, and then Ryan mentioning that there was one in group 1 that is a new action. It's just that there's a strategy that kind of has some language developed that I think we can pair together.
That's easy. Okay. Yep. Good stuff. All right, folks.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Thanks for staying a little late.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.